Okay, calling to order the Carson City Planning Commission meeting of October 26, 2022. Can I get a roll call, please?
Chair Wiggins,
Present.
Vice Chair Preston, Commissioner Borders, Commissioner Eswine, Commissioner Kilgore,
Here.
Commissioner Lloyd, Commissioner Perry. A quorum's present.
Okay, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Commissioner Borders, would you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of this public body. If you're here to talk on a specific agenda item, there'll be time during those agenda items for public comment as well. Does anyone have any general public comments for the Planning Commission? Okay, seeing none, moving on to item 5. For possible action, approval of the minutes of September 28th, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of our last meeting.
Okay, can I get a second? Second by Commissioner Borders. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item 6A. LU-2020-0033 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding a request from Wood Rogers for a 1-year time extension to October 28th, 2023 for an approved special use permit to allow for the construction and operation of a concrete batch plant and rock crushing operation with silos exceeding 45 feet in height on property zoned General Industrial Airport located at 4500 Ryan Way. Heather.
Thank you, Heather Ferris, for the record. This project is located on a 4.42 acre parcel at the end of Ryan Way, just north of Arrowhead Drive in the General Industrial Airport zoning district. The Planning Commission approved this special use permit on October 28th, 2020. The use includes the construction and operation of a concrete batch plant and rock crushing operation with silos exceeding the 45-foot height limitation. On October 21st, 2021, the applicant's request for an administrative extension of time was approved, extending the expiration of the SUP to October 28th, 2022. The applicant is now requesting additional time due to the amount of time it has taken to get through the FEMA approval process, which they still have not completed yet, for the required improvements on Arrowhead Drive. As noted in the staff report, staff is recommending approval of a 1-year extension. However, this was an error on staff's part, as the request was actually for 18 months. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the 1-year extension this evening, since we are just a couple days away from the expiration date, and then we'll bring the matter back for consideration for the additional 6 months next month with the appropriate time frame listed on the agenda. The applicant is here, and I'm available to answer questions.
Okay, does anyone have questions for staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one. Why is FEMA involved in this one?
Stephen Pote, Development Engineering. So there is a flood zone on both Ryan Way and on the frontage of Arrowhead, and there's improvements that impact both of those. So they're going through their design and review with FEMA.
So do they have to have a letter of map revision or something like that?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Borders?
Heather, on number 4, this is an extension to October of next year, which is a 1-year extension.
That's correct.
You were saying you're going to come back with and ask for another 6 months?
Right. That was their original request, which it was an
Okay.
error on staff's part
Well,
to advertise it as 1 year.
All right, well, I'm beginning to have problems with us extending permits ad infinitum. And my original thought was to leave this at October 28, 2023. With no extension, the permit shall become null and void, to take out the words "no exemptions granted." However, if they've asked for 6 months, I can live with that. But I would like to see, when we see it again, that it says, this is it. Otherwise, they need to get a new permit. Or we're gonna be in this thing for 4 or 5 more years. And I just think they need a new one. But if we're gonna see this again, then I can support this one then, but I would not be able to go much more than that. That's all I had. Thank you.
Other comments or questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant here? Yeah. And for anyone that comes up, please print your name. Yeah, so we spell it right for the record. Oh, can you hit
Turn
the
your
green button?
microphone on. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. Jillian Wilbrecht with Wood Rogers for the record.
Now, you can leave it green.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question. So, have you read the conditions of approval,
Yes.
and are you okay with them?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be agreeable to just sticking with the 1 year? As
We would. We're anticipating FEMA approval in the next couple of months, but they're the wild card in this. And so we wanted an extra 18 months, thinking that that would make sure that we don't have to come back again.
okay. As someone who's dealt with federal agencies and permitting, I am sympathetic.
It took
So I'd be
about-
okay with the 18, but
Yeah, it took about 8 months to get first round comments from them. So it's been a process.
okay. Thank you. Do you have any other comments for the commission?
I do not. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay.
We have one permit in with Carson City. We've gone through 2 rounds of revisions on that. We're anticipating a second permit to go in as soon as we get FEMA approval. And so we've been actively working on the project.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Oh, should I stay or should I be done?
You could stay,
Okay.
just in case. Well, any discussion from the commission on this?
I'd just go back to my original point. I just think, you know, we can't keep granting extensions forever and forever and forever. I don't, like I said, that they said a year, maybe 18 months. I'd be happy with the 18 months, but then I would say that's it. That's the sunset for this special use permit. If they don't make that, then I would like to see them come back and do it again. But, you know, that's for next month or whenever we get together. I can support this.
Okay, so he's giving you a little forewarning for next month's meeting, I think.
Loud and clear.
Okay, well, if there's no other discussion, anyone want to do a motion? Okay, Vice Chair Preston?
I move to approve an extension of the expiration date for LU 2020-0033 to October 28th, 2023, as approved, as the approved special use permit continues to be appropriate, and the activities permitted by the special use permit will not adversely impact other properties in the area or the public interest.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kilgore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6B, LU-2022-0445 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding a request from Lamar Advertising Company for a special use permit to retain an existing billboard on property zone general commercial located at 4440 Highway 50 East. And then before Heather introduces this, we have a disclosure.
Thank you, Chair. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. Mr. Christopher Wickstead owns a property immediately adjacent to the billboard at issue and has previously provided public comment concerning the billboard. I have a personal relationship with Mr. Wickstead that qualifies as a commitment in a private capacity under NRS 281A.065. The judgment of a reasonable person in my position would be materially affected by that relationship, and therefore I will not be voting on this matter.
Thank you. All right, Heather.
Thank you, Heather Ferris, again for the record. The parcel is zoned general commercial and is located on the north side of Highway 50 East, just west of Empire Ranch Road. The primary business on site is used auto sales. The billboard has been at this location for approximately 16 years. The applicant is requesting to retain the existing billboard at this location. Per the city's development standards, a special use permit for a billboard automatically expires 5 years from the date of issuance. However, during last year's review of the billboard, the Planning Commission only granted approval for 1 year. The billboard complies with the city's standards, including but not limited to location, height, zoning, spacing between other billboards, sign size, and proximity to residential zoning districts. The lighting associated with the billboard has been of particular concern, and when the special use permit was reviewed last year, it was only granted for the 1 year due to the lighting issues. The approved special use permit included conditions requiring lighting on both the east and west sides of the sign to be shielded, required any modifications or additions of light fixtures to be approved by the planning division, and for required building permits to be obtained, required lights to be turned off when the paid advertisement is not present, and required the use of darker, non-glossy advertisement to reduce the amount of light reflected from the sign onto adjacent properties. These conditions were intended to address the lighting impacts on adjacent residences. As outlined in the application information, the applicant has converted the lighting fixtures to a shielded LED unit in an effort to reduce the amount of light dissipating from the units. Planning Division staff was not provided with an opportunity to review and approve fixtures before they were placed, and therefore the applicant is not in compliance with Condition 8. We've received correspondence from 2 different property owners complaining about the lighting on the sign, and one of them also noting that the copy materials continue to be bright in color and reflect the light to the north into the existing homes. Those comments have been provided to you in your packet as well as late material. I also drove past the sign, and while it was dusk, the bright sign copies clearly did reflect the light. The Planning Commission has the authority to approve a special use permit upon making each of the required findings in the affirmative. Because of the continued issues with the lighting, staff is recommending the Planning Commission approve the special use permit, subject to a condition of approval prohibiting lighting of the sign. With the conditions of approval included in the staff report, staff was able to make all 7 findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval. With that, I'm available for questions, and Dan Selby is here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Heather. I have a question. So we're prohibiting lighting as Condition 8 here. Condition 9 is still to use darker, non-glossy designs. Why does that matter?
We could remove that if the Planning Commission desires.
I don't know if I've never noticed a sign to reflect if it's not lighted at night, but okay. I thought there might have been some other extenuating circumstance. Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for staff? Commissioner Borders?
Heather, in the report, it shows that the applicant was not in compliance with condition number 10. Is that now condition number 9? And what happened to the one in between? I don't have a copy of what we approved originally.
The notice of decision is attached to it's included in the packet.
What you have in the staff report as condition 9 is what's referred to as condition 10 in the NOD. Condition 10 in the NOD says the applicant shall use darker, non-glossy designs to reduce the amount of light reflected from the sign onto adjacent properties.
Okay, it's number 9 that was removed. All right, thank you, I got it.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, can the applicant please come forward? Yep. Oh, we had it. Perfect.
Danny Selby with Lamar Advertising.
Okay. Have you read the conditions for approval?
I actually don't have those in front of me, but I understand them from last year. Obviously, the one condition, number 10, changed to number 9.
Yeah.
But
and-
yes, we understand
And
that.
I think the
Thank you.
future special use permit is just outright prohibiting lighting of the billboard at this point.
I just want to clarify that that is just this specific billboard in question, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're in agreement, not in agreement? State your case.
I would, I mean, I don't want to be in agreement to number 8. Obviously, almost every billboard in this town is illuminated, both from my company and from competing companies. Those billboards are pretty strict. We have pretty strict lighting policies on those. They all have to be downlit, obviously because of dark skies. Lamar Advertising as a whole, our whole nationwide, we converted every light fixture in our company to LED. We use what was considered to be directional lighting. Those were what we were told was too bright. The Hall of Fame fixtures that you see here in these pictures, this is what we reverted back to. And unfortunately, I know that Heather mentioned that we did not pull the permit to do that because we had never pulled the permit to change them the first time. I was told by permitting or by planning the first time when we changed to the original LEDs that for a simple fixture swap, a permit was not necessary. So this fixture in particular is just an LED version of the same exact fixture that was there for 15 years prior. So the last year, the light that nobody liked, that light is gone. This light is a LED replica of the exact same fixture. It's an ad view fixture by Hall of Fame, and it is the same fixture that was there for 15 years prior.
Okay. Can you comment on the glossiness of some of the signage at this site?
You know, it's unfortunate. This particular advertiser, we've asked them to provide less glossy material. We don't order that material from them. This Maverick is a national advertiser. They buy billboards across the country. They order their material in bulk and it's sent to us. On the reverse side of this same copy, that is a copy that we do order, and it is less glossy. I mean, what we use is pretty standard, though, in the industry. I mean, there's 2 different types of material. I could get further into that if you'd like, but there's 2 different types of material. One tends to be more glossy than the other. This happens to be a glossy one. The other type of material that's on the west face of this board is the eco material, which tends to be less glossy.
Okay. Does anyone else on the commission have a question for the applicant? Commissioner Borders.
So it sounds like to me that all you're saying is it's not my fault, man. You're putting up the same kind of light, just powered by LEDs instead of regular lights. So the amount of light that's being issued is the same. You're telling me that you can't tell somebody that they can't put a sign up there that's glossy because they're bigger than you are. And you don't have any other place in town where you could put it. So it just sounds like every time we ask you to comply, and we've been through this at least twice now, we get promises but no delivery. So, personally, one of the options I see is to deny the whole damn permit completely, because we don't seem to get any cooperation from Lamar. And, I'm sorry, that's the way it seems when we sit on this side of the board.
Okay. Any other comments?
Permission to
Commissioner.
comment on that? Reply?
Sure.
When we first left this meeting a year ago in October, we left this meeting immediately with the guy that was complaining about that, and we drove directly to the sign. I explained to him what was going on there and what we would do. We have since then used different material. I wasn't in charge of ordering this material, so I apologize for that. We went immediately to the store. We got tint. I tinted the original lenses with 5% block like you would tint your car with. I was hoping that would deflect some of that light a little bit. It did not. So I was told that our light needed to be shielded as it had been prior. So that's why I went back to the light that was shielded. Since this light was there for 15 years prior and there was no complaints until we had switched to the LED version, that's why we went back to this same version here. So as for, the allocations that we have not complied, I don't agree with those. We have complied. We've done what we needed to do, and we've tried to be amicable to the complaints. That being said, I understand. If the condition of approval is that you guys prefer it does not have lights, then so be it. I can take the lights off of this structure. I just don't want that to be, general practice moving forward as I apply for special use permits for the other 10 boards I have in town.
Yeah, I think the fact this one's had several complaints and come before us numerous times, this one's going to be treated differently. So
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I just want to put back on the record that in 2016, I brought this billboard before this commission. And in 2016, there were concerns about lights. I think part of the challenge on this, and I think the planning manager has addressed it, is it's near a residential area. So has the applicant tried? I think he has. And so I don't want there to be a perception that there's anything punitive or there's frustration with the applicant. I think the issue with this particular sign is that it's close to residential. And so there's a conflict there. And you have findings of fact to make, including findings of fact regarding neighborhood compatibility. And so based on those findings, based on the location of this particular billboard, independent of any efforts made by the applicant, I think the right answer is to just say this particular billboard cannot be lit because it is right next door to the residential. But I don't want anything to be perceived that there's frustration with the applicant. At least from the staff's perspective, this is purely based on looking at the findings and looking at the location of the billboard.
So the applicant would always have an opportunity to come back and ask for lighting after the fact, right? File another special use permit to change this, provided he would develop a lighting that isn't offensive to neighborhood residents, people, right? So to keep this sign going right now, we could do this. Okay. All right. Do you have any other comments for the commission? Or does the commission have any questions for the applicant?
If we're gonna keep, line 8, I would ask that we could please remove line 9, the non-glossy design.
Mr. Chair, additionally, I think we could probably eliminate condition 7.
That is true. You don't need to shield non-usable lights. Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, we got a comment. Question? No? Take it away. All right. Now's the time for public comment on this item. And after you comment, please sign or print your name for the record.
Sorry, I didn't finish.
Good evening, Christopher Wickstead for the record, homeowner adjacent to the billboard. So just a quick introduction. Homeowner, resident of Carson City, 21 years, taxpayer, homeowner, the whole bit. Was also part of redevelopment authority.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sorry, yeah,
everyone
was
can
also
hear?
part of the.
You can move the mic towards you.
Thanks. Redevelopment Authority Chamber as well. So I've contributed to the city as best I could. I'm now a Tesla engineer. Makes it hard. I'm here to relate my concerns as I have related in 2006, 2009, 2012, 2016, 2019, and again last year and this year. You know, I see this billboard as I look out my window eating dinner, whether it's lit or not. The billboard is blight, no matter where it's placed in the city. Within 300 feet of residential, it's not the closest one to residential if you consider the mobile homes down 50, but it's probably the second closest. You know, I mean, I raised my child here, and this is my primary and only residence in the world. So right here in Carson City, the best city in the world to live in. Others have complained about the lighting. The Marson family has been nothing but great neighbors to me since I started living there. It's 2006. They're the closest to it. There was also a resident underneath the billboard that complained at that time as well, through Ernie Adler. The lighting did not meet the signing conditions of approval, at least in 2021 that you guys approved, with respect to the copy, the glossy copy. And then also, now the billboard didn't have a permit, I guess, for the lights, but also the signed conditions of approval, or I guess for the lighting. I think the billboard company has an obligation to uphold the requirements when it comes to like a glossy copy coming from Maverick. I'm a customer of Maverick. I like those guys, but I mean, hey, if it's a requirement, it's a requirement. And yeah, I respect Lamar. I respect Herman Bauer, the owner of the property, as well as the city and the planning commission. Thank you for including my letters and for taking my comments. So I really appreciate that, and that's my concern. I really think the thing should be gone, and I think it's too close to residential. I think billboards should be a minimum 1,000 feet away. I mean, you know, the other ones are a loophole, honestly, but yeah, 300 feet's awfully close. So that's my concern.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. Didn't see anything new, Heather, really, to answer as far as questions or, no?
I didn't hear anything new.
Okay. How about discussion from the commissioners? I'll start. I'm okay with striking 7 and 9. Definitely don't want the thing lit at this point.
Because this has been such a bone of contention for so many years, would it be appropriate to review it in a year?
Without the lighting,
Yeah.
it's really planning commission's call.
Okay.
Commissioner Kilgore?
I understand the situation with the glossy aspect of the application, because not only does that emit light from it when it is lit, as far as reflection, but also during the day in the sunlight. So that is also another reason why I think that it should be further away from anywhere residential. But you also know my record as far as voting on these things, and that's never going to change. I do feel that they are a blight, and they do affect the residents. Even within 600-800 feet, they can be definitely a detriment. So in which case, like I said, you know how I stand on billboards, and that is not going to change. I have been challenged before to not be a hypocrite. So in which case, I'm going to stick to my guns on this one, and I say that we do everything we can. Of course, this one specifically has had many issues in the past, as were raised, and we should definitely do our due diligence to be sure that this can't happen again.
Any other comments from the commissioners? Go for it.
Commissioner Preston, for the record, I'm agreeing with Commissioner Borders that I'd like to revisit this in a year. And the reason that I'd like to revisit it in a year is to make sure that we do comply, that the lights are off. And I'm with the same feeling of, I realize that Maverick is a national advertiser. However, as a condition on that billboard, they could make an exception if you were to request it. And that's where I feel.
So you're pro leaving 9 on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I also, if you,
Okay. All right, we're getting close to a quorum.
would you like a motion?
Maybe, I think the applicants.
May I ask who's going to monitor what is glossy or not glossy? Who's gonna make that determination? Is it gonna be the adjacent property owner? Is it gonna be me as the property? Is it gonna be the city?
It's going to be you to ensure it doesn't happen. Then it's going to be someone complaining, and then it's going to be staff checking that complaint.
Okay.
And then we'll be back here in a year.
Okay. Okay.
That's where I see this going anyway.
10-4.
If someone wants to make a motion that I believe changes the date on number 4 to 2023 and striking 7 and 8 and 9 stay.
Yeah.
Someone wants to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve LU 2022-0445 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval with the amendments to condition number 4 to 2023 and the elimination of condition number 7.
Can I get a second? Second by Commissioner Eswine. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
Nay by Commissioner Kilgore. And I think you kind of stated your reasons.
I'll clarify.
Okay.
So it's very clear that it's a blight to many residents and not just the one that stepped forward. And it's, of course, no personal attack on anyone that's in the application process. Of course, this is very detrimental to the effects on residents nearby. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 6C, LU-2022-0397 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request from Tom Metcalf for a special use permit to allow for a guest building greater than 1,000 feet in size on a property zone, single-family residential, 1-acre planned unit development located at 2669 Skyview Court. Heather.
Good evening, Heather Manzo, for the record. So before you is a request for a guest building on a lot that's not yet developed with a single-family residence. The property is located within the Adams Estates subdivision, which The site improvement work is currently under construction at that location. And the applicant has made a proactive request for the guest building with the intent to concurrently construct the single-family residence on the lot and the guest building. The reasons for doing that are really to make efficient use of construction teams and design teams so that both the single-family residence and the guest building can be constructed concurrently, reducing the amount of time and trips necessary to develop this lot. Just to quickly go over Carson City Development Standards, 1.4, that outlines guest building standards. And for those guest buildings within the SF1A zone, they're limited to 1,000 square feet or less and could go straight to building permit without coming before you. In this case, the applicant has made a request to develop an 1,176 square foot guest building. The reasons stated were based on construction materials being used and the needs of the family member that's going to be living in that residence. If approved, the applicant will establish a primary single-family residence first. And the conditions of approval that are recommended would require that to be the case. So in terms of the project site, as I mentioned, the site is being developed currently. With that will be the roadway coming into the project as well as the site landscaping and some trails that were required as part of the overall tentative map. A final map has recorded on the property recently, just September of this year. And the development was approved as planned unit development with 12 single-family residential lots and just under 4 acres of common open space. So this lot does have the creek behind it to the south. Oops, sorry. And then in terms of the request that's before you, again, it's 1,176 square feet for the guest building. It is subject to the guest building standards, which would require that a family member or non-paying guest be a resident of that site. It can't be rented out. A deed restriction would be required as part of this request if it's approved. And the applicant is proposing a unique construction concept that creates thicker walls that is kind of unique to the area. He can go into a little bit more description as to why the additional square footage is necessary. In terms of the special use permit, the only trigger is the extra 176 square feet. It falls below the accessory structure standards in terms of percent of lot and percent of size based on the primary residence. So the only special use permit is just for the guest building itself. And staff has received several emails and phone calls regarding this request. You received most of them with the staff report package. There was one that was distributed yesterday as late material. And to just clarify as well, the architecture will match the primary residence. The applicant didn't provide the concept for the guest building itself, but did provide a rendering of what the primary residence would look like and has proposed to incorporate materials that are used on the primary home into the guest building. And so in terms of the comments that I received from residents, most of the emails noted inconsistency with Carson City Municipal Code related to density increases. And I just wanted to reiterate that guest buildings are allowed. They're not viewed as a doubling of density with Carson City Municipal Code. They're allowed by right in many cases, and the only trigger is the extra square footage for this request. As noted in the staff report and as presented this evening, guest buildings are an allowed use, and in terms of the square footage that's been requested, it really would result in a negligible impact, whether it's 1,000 square feet or 1,176. The impacts are the same in terms of our evaluation of the request. Staff is able to make all of the findings and is recommending approval of the request. And the applicant's here if you'd like to have them come up. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff?
I have one.
Commissioner Borders?
You said that the deed restriction, because it's in the code, there's no need to put the deed restriction in the recommended conditions of approval?
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, can the applicant please come forward?
Yeah, do you mind writing? Tom Metcalf for the record, and I've only been a lefty for 6 days. Again, Heather did a great job, and as she said, proactively, I worked with planning. The main reason the square footage went up is we're using a product on all of the 3 lots. Well, first, let me go back. My family is purchasing lots 10, 11, and 12. My wife and I, my 87-year-old father, and my adult son will be living in a single-family residence on lot 12 that we'll be building. No adjacent structures. My dad is now living with us in the house. My oldest daughter, her husband, and 2 of my grandchildren will be building a house on lot 11. No additional structures. And my youngest daughter, her husband, and my 3rd grandchild will be building on lot 10. And I've got Miss Roxanne Brown here, my youngest daughter's mother-in-law. So we wanted to build a structure for her that was separate. And we were proactive with the planning department. We got with our architect, our civil engineer. But then a few months ago, I decided that I thought all the homes should be built out of ICF, or the structural walls, exterior structural walls are insulated concrete forms. Most homes typically in a cold climate like this are 2x6 wood framed with insulation. Insulated concrete forms are 12 inches. They have a higher R value. They're more efficient in the long run. They're sturdier. I have built one residence in the past that was ICF, and I loved it. In fact, the people that bought it, the reason they bought it, it was ICF. So that actually took up an extra 71 square feet. But then going to planning, I knew that I could go no more than 10% over with staff only, which was 1,100. And I said, I really don't want to go back to 2x6 and make this the only 2x6 home. And I said, well, let's go to the planning commission and see if we can get the other extra, in my opinion, 76 square feet, but it is 176 square feet. And this is, I know the late letter said Metcalf Builders and we're going to spec build and develop and build homes. No, Metcalf Builders has nothing to do with this project. In fact, my insurance won't even allow me to build single-family homes. So I'm building this as owner-builder. My daughters will be building theirs as owner-builder. And so far, I can tell you 7 out of the 12 lots are spoken for. Obviously, we have 3 out of the other 4. We know 3 out of the 4. And in fact, lot 9, just east of my youngest daughter's lot that we're subject site is my wife's ex-boss and her family. Lot 3 across the street from this lot are friends of ours for 20 years. The husband was my shortstop on our softball team for years. And then lot number 1 is a person that is going to build a house in a couple years for his family, and he was born and raised here in Carson. Right now, that one sketch I showed you, I apologize, I didn't have the matured plans. I actually got them like last night, Heather, sorry. But we're doing all modern farm is our design, and all the materials will be complementary. We do have a homeowners association and an architectural review committee internally.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't ask you this, but you're okay with the conditions of approval for this?
Absolutely.
Okay. Comments?
I just feel fortunate that my daughter-in-law is okay with me living behind her.
All right. What was your name for the record?
I'm Roxanne Brown.
Okay, we want to make sure we get that on
I'm
the
a
record.
retired school superintendent, and my only child is married to his youngest daughter, and my only grandchild. So I will be living directly behind them, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public, or actually, is there any questions for the applicant at this point?
Yes, I have one, Mr. Metcalf. So, I mean, usually when we see these requests for a accessory structure or mother-in-law's quarters, they are after someone has built a house, you know, and here's a case where you want to do them both at once. Why don't you just add on to the house you're going to build instead of doing two separate homes? And I'm going to explain a little bit why that is an issue, because, I mean, in this room, sometime back at a meeting, when this development came forward, there was a lot of concern by the neighbors around, because I believe the density was at 24 homes, and as it ended up, it became 12, and it's a common open space development, I believe, right? And there was some land dedicated and so forth. So the perception is that you're trying to get around what all those people heard us say that night of that meeting. And so my question again is, you wouldn't have any problem if you just added on to your home to it. Why do you want two separate ones?
Well, and also, sir, with all due respect, I wouldn't have any problem if it was 1,000 square feet. Architecturally, we felt that it was better to separate the structures than to make one big mass. And I'll go back to 10 years ago. I came before the Planning Commission to my parents owned a home, 2 acres on Ash Canyon. They were aging out, and we had a structure in the back. We actually went up to 2,000 square feet. And we were able to get that through, and it is a separate structure also. I think probably, and the other thing is, Ms. Brown is,
You can say
sorry, not that
70.
old. And to be separate and to have her own space. And whereas my mom and dad lived in our back structure, my mom unfortunately passed back there 8 years ago. We literally moved my dad into our house from the mother-in-law's unit about 3 months ago, because he's getting older. So to me, architecturally, instead of a big mass, I like the breaking up. Also, and I can tell you that on lot 11, there's no room to put another house. And my lot, there is definitely no room to put another house. So this kind of configuration was actually planned that out of 3 lots, we could get 1 accessory structure, mother-in-law's unit.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment for this item. Is there any public comment? There is. Okay. The applicant could step away?
Yeah.
Thank you. And after you speak, if you could sign in.
Press the button.
It's ready to go.
Okay. Dave Fisher, homeowner, recent homeowner. Really, my concerns are pretty simple. One was just voiced by Commissioner Perry. Not clear to me why, if you're able to have 3 lots adjacent to each other and build 3 large homes, you can't add 1,100 square feet to one of those homes. I understand that there is an existing allowance for secondary homes on certain lots. But I'm concerned about both process and precedent. If this goes through, then the other, what would that be, 9 builders can come to you and say, you have already allowed a slightly larger structure, and you know, that one was 1,100 feet. We really only want to go to 1,200 feet. And then the next guy comes along, builds his 1,200 feet and says, yeah, I understand this was designed to be single family and that the person living in that home is supposed to be family, but you know, my star employee doesn't have a place to live for 6 months. Maybe he could just live in my home that I have built adjacent. And you know, he's got his ATV and he's got his work truck and he's got his personal vehicle. So now we've added 3 vehicles. And now the next fella comes along and he says, well, you know, 1,200 feet was okay, so 1,250 should be okay. And the similar process accelerates. If that were to happen, and I have no reason to doubt the applicant saying that what he plans to do is what he plans to do, but suppose the next guy is not so honest. Suppose the next guy, as someone alluded to, said, well, you know, they've said we could only build 12 houses, but they've already allowed a second house over here that was bigger than statute allows. Maybe I can fudge that a little bit. And then, heck, why don't I just apply for some sort of exemption that the person who lives there doesn't even have to be a relative? I don't even have to know them. What the heck? They could be the guy that just moved out from San Quentin. We have no way of knowing that. That's why I think both precedent and procedure are so important. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. What is that noise over there? Is that your?
I smacked the speaker, if that's what you heard.
You need the agenda item on here as well.
Oh, okay. Is there any other public comment at this time? Come on down. Thank you. Staff, can we get another pen for the?
Someone stole the pen, Commissioner. And it wasn't us. I just want to go on the record to say that we're clean.
Okay, state your name and 3 minutes, please.
My name's Bruno Belot. This is my wife, Kelly Belot.
Could you get closer to the mic? So everyone-
My name is Bruno Belot. This is my wife, Kelly Belot. We live behind the property that is in of question. And certainly no disrespect to you, Mr. Metcalf. And sorry I didn't get a chance to play softball with you. But I totally agree with Commissioner Perry here and the concern that he's expressed, as well as my neighbor Dave and my other neighbor Dave and his wife, who are here, that once we establish the precedent of building additional properties on what we've fought very hard to just limit to 12 properties so that we can maintain the integrity of what we believed our neighborhood was going to be, we don't want additional residents built on these properties to go from 12 to 13 to 14 and 15 and so forth. So our concern was very appropriately expressed by our neighbor Dave, and our concern continues to be that we maintain the integrity of our property, and we're behind the property in question on the other side of the creek. I came here before this commission with concerns about water that I still have concerns about, even though I was assured that there wasn't going to be any water issues. But we haven't had a good watering season. And for that reason, I'm still concerned that when we do, and all these properties are placed on this land, where's the water going to go? And I'm afraid that, again, that when you build a berm on one side of a creek, the people on the other side of the creek that don't have the berm are going to get flooded. And I expressed that concern. The hydrologist said I shouldn't be worried about it, but I'm sorry, water has its own way of doing things. And people have their own way of doing things as well. And so the precedent being established that it's okay to build additional residents when we've limited it to 12 is of concern to me, because all of a sudden it can go from 12 to 13 to 15 to whatever, depending on what people want. Again, I don't have anything against Mr. Metcalf whatsoever. I don't know the gentleman. I wish him well with his family and so forth. But the bottom line here is we fought hard to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood. And part of that integrity is based on the notion that there's space, not filling the space with additional residents.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry, for bringing that up, because that was our main concern.
Could you
I,
state your name for the
Kelly
record?
Belot.
Okay.
And I would also just like to add that I do feel like we're getting back to square one when we did fight so hard to get it down to the 12 lots and have the lots expanded to what we thought originally was going to be an acre. And I didn't know, what special use permits were allowed. And it seems like 1,000 square feet is the limit. My question, I guess, to Mr. Metcalf is, it sounds like they already have 3 lots. Why not just buy one more lot and build one more house on an available lot if they want to have an additional house, rather than cramming it all into a smaller lot?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further? We'll let the public comment go, and then we'll have an opportunity for the applicant to come back up and speak. One more push. There you go.
Emily Beglin. I just feel like the size of the proposed guest house, I understand Mr. Metcalf's reasoning for expanding it due to materials, is nearly 1,200 square feet, and 1,200 square feet is the size of a standard entry-level home. And it's just increasing the density of the development. There's a reason we have rules. 1,000 square feet is 1,000 square feet, and I understand if it were limited to 1,000 square feet, he would be able to come forward. He wouldn't have to come forward and could build that. I just don't feel like it's necessary to build it more than 1,000 square feet.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time?
Hi, Frank McDonnell.
Could you push that button, please?
Gotta get my name in. Do I gotta press it and hold it? Okay.
No, there you go.
Yeah, my name's Frank McDonnell, and actually, I was the one who brought that up, that Mr. Perry brought up, that I live just north of this property. And not only are there vacant lots, well now, developing lots behind me, but I got vacant lot across the street from me. I got 2 vacant lots kitty corner to me. We got vacant lots all around this neighborhood. And I have the same concern as everybody else, is having 2 properties on 1 acre plot. That's it, and I submitted something today at 1:51 explaining it, and then you guys emailed me back at 3:03 saying, oh, we're sorry, we didn't get it by 3 o'clock, so it's not gonna be submitted to the record. So I do have my email, which basically states everything that everybody else said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? I think you had about 1.5 minutes left, so I'll let you come back.
I give my time to it.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
going? Now we're going, right? Okay. My name's Dave Miller, and I was set to make a really neat speech, but Dave and Bruno and Kelly are my neighbors, so all I just want to say is ditto. I agree with everything they said. I'll give it time to somebody else that has a better speech than me, but hey, my concerns are what Dave and Bruno and Kelly said, so anyhow, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the commission does appreciate when people bring new stuff, not just saying the same thing over and over.
Emily Beglin, I just wanted to also point out, Mr. Metcalf was stating the reason that they wanted to have an additional dwelling on this particular property rather than adding on is because the woman who will be inhabiting the guest house is quite young, in her words, and in that case, I think that she would be perfectly fine to buy a different house in Carson City if she needed one over 1,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. The applicant could come back if you have any other words for us.
Sure, again, for the record, Tom Metcalf, I just wanted to maybe add some more information. As everyone knows,
You know, if you wipe out that garage, you wouldn't even be here.
Wipe.
The square foot.
Well, the garage, okay, sir.
I
But,
don't know.
you know, and well, we could go 2 stories too, but then that blocks views.
Yeah.
But, and that is a consideration. We have CC&Rs within the development. I read those before I decided to purchase the lots, and they're very restrictive. We have 12 lots. As Heather stated, there's 4 acres of common area. That one reason I picked the 3 lots was because of the common area in front to the south and also on my lot to the west. Our CC&Rs, as I said, are very restrictive. We cannot buy a lot and build Miss Brown another house because we'd have to build her a minimum size home of 2,500 square feet. The other thing is, if you take a look at the actual civil drawings and the building setbacks of each lot, they're very restrictive. So we took a long time to plan who got what lot for our family requirements. As I said, lot 12 that my wife and I are on, we could not build another lot. We couldn't hardly get the house much bigger, and it's about 4,000 square feet. The lot number 11, there's no room with the setbacks to build another house. It was lot 10 that with the design my youngest daughter picked out that we could build an adjacent structure or a mother-in-law's. And I know it's not the time or place, but as an engineer and a builder, I looked at all the other lots too. They're very restrictive. I can't vouch for this, but it's going to be very tough for people to build 2 structures within the building setbacks of all the lots. So again, we spent a lot of time on figuring this out. Thank you. Any questions?
You could stay here for a sec.
Okay.
Commissioner Lloyd?
I have a question for staff, actually. Heather, I just want to clarify that under our current code, this unit essentially would not be able to be Airbnb'd or rented out.
That's correct. The guest building ordinance requires that the property have a deed restriction that limits the occupancy, so it could not be rented out in any capacity.
Okay. Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Yeah, I have one question for the applicant. Do your CC&Rs allow you to build 2 single-family dwellings on one lot?
We're allowed to build what is code with Carson City. We're SF 1 acre. We're allowed to build up to 1,000 square feet. The Architectural Review Committee would approve us coming to the Planning Commission to increase that to 1,176 square feet.
Okay, thank you. And a question for city staff. one that I guess, since we've seen a number of these in the last year. So when an applicant comes in and they want to build a second residence, a mother-in-law's quarter, does the city charge them an extra sewer hookup fee and an extra water fee? And do they pay separate ones every month, like two different residents, or are they just paying for one?
Stephen Poteo, Development Engineering for the record. The only time that another connection fee would be required is if there's another subsequent connection. So if there's another sewer lateral, water lateral, they would pay another connection fee. And that's typically doesn't happen since they're not allowed to be rented out. Typically, you just see one lateral, so there's no additional connection fee associated.
Commissioner Borders?
Yes, sir. Are you on the Architectural Control Committee?
I am.
Is anybody else?
As of right now, it's myself and the developer.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So public comment, I mean, it's not really a dialogue. You just state your concerns for the public and to us to hear them. So it's not a question Q&A. Sorry. Is there any discussion from the commission on this?
Mr. Chair, if we can just frame this, because I want to make sure you have a really clear record,
Okay.
whichever way you vote. So just to be really clear, 1,000 square foot guest building is allowed in the single family 1 acre. So we're not talking about whether or not this applicant can have a guest building. That's not before the commission. What's before the commission is whether or not the applicant can have a special use permit. It's not a variance, so it's 7 required findings of fact for a guest building that exceeds the size of 1,000 square feet. So I think it's really important as you create your record and you discuss this, that it's very much on point to the 7 required findings for a special use permit, and not whether or not it's a good idea to have a guest building because the zoning allows the guest building, but whether or not the findings can be met for another 176, I think it's 176 square feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Borders, your hand's still up, or was that from earlier?
No, that's okay. When we originally considered this property, the developer used the open space requirement so that he could get some smaller lots into that 12-acre site, or that it was bigger than 12 acres, I think. But anyway, so that he could get some accommodations using the open spaces to allow him to do that. Much to the chagrin of most of the neighbors out there who really wanted to stay at 1 acre lots. I think I appreciate their concern. It just seems like 1 week we said, okay, now you can have a smaller lot, and now you can have more than one house on a lot. But like Hope said, if it was 1,000 square feet, we wouldn't even be here. I think the 2 options that I would have liked to have seen was, number one, that it all be under one roof, and that therefore then it never is a problem. Or number 2, that it was at 1,000 square feet. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Preston, Vice Chair.
I'd like to add one other thing to that, is that a lot of people are not, sitting in this board as much as we are, looking at these guest houses. And what we're seeing is that Mr. Metcalf is being very straightforward with what he's looking at. We have some people that will actually just put a portico on in between the houses. And like you said, they're guest houses as opposed to that. He's been very forthright on this. And this particular neighborhood is got all sorts of different uses. And there are several different guest house with separate entrances that are, all under one roof. And he's chosen not to do that. He's chosen to be very, like you said, very straightforward on this. And he typically would not even be here if it was not 1,000. If it did not exceed the 1,000 square feet. If the association requires 2,500 square feet. The other house is 2,700 square feet. And looking at these lots, I agree with him. I don't see how they would be able to go ahead and make the turn, and be able to put the cars in the garages. So, again, it's back to the findings of fact.
Okay. Any other discussion from the commissioners? I'll add mine if, I actually didn't think this would be an issue on this board for less than 200 square feet for something that, that this doesn't seem extraordinary. And I think Commissioner Preston said it. We look at things where people are 100% adding their extra buildings to lots around this town. And this one doesn't seem extraordinary. And I agree. I think Mr. Metcalf explained why it makes sense to do this. So I'm okay with how it sits. Any other commissioner discussion? Well, seeing none, I'll make a motion then. I move to approve special use permit LU-2022-0397 based on the ability to make all findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report. Second by Commissioner Preston. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays?
Nay. The basis of my nay is I do believe it will result in prejudice to other properties in the vicinity.
Agreed.
Number 7.
I'm a nay also.
Ooh.
Okay. So 4-3? Okay, motion passes. Left
you
side of
very
the
much.
commission over here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
The lefties.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I when we went through section 18, a couple years ago, we grappled with this, and honestly, I think we need to go back to it again because I see this as becoming problematic in the future. That's all I needed. I think we need to revisit guest houses. Because when someone passes away, then what happens to the guest house, and the fact that, I'm paying one water and sewer fee for my home, but there are other people in town who have 2 homes on their lots and they're paying one water and sewer fee. Seems to me like there's a subsidy there, and I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have you seem like you want to say something.
Yeah, the Steve's not here. So my question would be to the engineer is, doesn't the sewer and water lines actually have to do with the size of the homes and the number of bedrooms and baths?
I feel like we're getting a little off topic. We can certainly agendize as Commissioner Perry suggested, and I think that any follow-up questions can happen when this is an agendized item, if that's okay.
Yep, that works. Moving on to item. We'll give it a second while folks filter out. Okay, item 6D. VAR-2022-0394. Discussion and possible action regarding a request from Lee Hutchins for a variance to reduce the required minimum lot size for a property zone mobile home 12,000 to create 4 residential lots on a property located at 3419 Otha Street. Heather.
Good evening again. For the record, Heather Manzo. So this is a request for a variance to reduce the minimum lot size from 12,000 square feet to 10,915 square feet to essentially get 4 lots out of the property. The property is 1 acre in size, and initially the request was made with a minor variance application. But however, code requires that in order for staff to approve a minor variance, all potentially impacted abutting property owners need to sign a letter approving the request. In this case, the applicant was unable to obtain all signatures necessary for a minor variance. Just for a point of reference, in the past, minor variances have been approved on 3 different instances over the last 15 years to reduce the minimum lot size. In one instance, it involved existing residential parcels where there was no impact to the overall density of the project, and that was related to several home sites that were adjacent to Governor's Field. They expanded the field and got approval for a reduction to the lot size of the adjacent residences, about 10 of those. So that one didn't have the result of increased density. There was another request across the street from this property, directly across to the west, that was approved 15 years ago. In evaluating the application material for that minor variance, staff was unable to identify any discussion or contemplation about the impacts to density. So before you this evening is a major variance that requires Planning Commission approval and is under a header of code that specifically identifies requirements for a major variance. The property is zoned MH12 with a minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet. Based on that minimum lot size, the applicant could request the subdivision of this parcel to get 3 different lots. With this application, if approved, they would get up to 4 lots on the same parcel. Carson City Municipal Code 18.02.085 variances states specifically that the approval of a variance shall not be granted where it results in a change to the residential density for the zone. And so this is the application that this is the plan that the applicant had provided with the variance. And preceding this was a parcel map application that, because the minor variance was not able to be approved, was rejected by staff. So this is the layout that the applicant has proposed. And in reviewing a variance application, there are 3 findings of fact that must be met in order for a variance to be approved. Finding 1 states that because of special circumstances applicable to the subject property, including shape, size, topography, or location of surroundings, the strict application of the zoning ordinance would deprive the subject property of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity or under identical zoning classifications. As outlined in the staff report, this is a rectangular parcel. There's nothing unique in terms of size, location, characteristic that would warrant the variance, and so staff was unable to make finding 1. Finding 2 states that the granting of the application is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights of the applicant. Again, granting of the variance would result in a change of density. The 1 acre parcel is developable today in a manner that would produce multiple lots should that be desired. In this case, the request to reduce the lot size would result in a change of density. So with that, staff was unable to make finding 2. And then finding 3, the last finding, is that granting of the application would not, under the circumstances of the particular case, adversely affect to a material degree the health or safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood of the subject property, and would not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or materially injurious to property or investment improvements in the neighborhood of the subject property. So in this case, we did find that this would not be an issue, and so staff was able to make finding 3. So based on the summary of findings, staff was unable to make 2 of the 3 necessary findings and is recommending denial of the application. I did want to note that we received a call from an opposing party. They have property on Otha Street just down the way, and in the late 1990s had requested a similar reduction to lot size that would have resulted in 4 parcels. And I think it was a verbal discussion with staff at that time, but they were told they could not do it. And so this resident wanted to note their opposition to this request. And the applicant is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Borders, I just automatically look at you now.
Oh, okay. If the applicant was able to get all 4 signatures or all property owners to agree, and this would become a minor variance, that would go to staff for approval. Would staff still recommend that it not be approved?
So it's really interesting, and I think it's a question for discussion, especially as we're going through the Title 18 review. The major variance code does specifically state the impact to density based on zoning. The minor variance standards do not specifically state that same rule. What it states is that the administrator finds it consistent with code. I don't remember the exact same language, but if you look at it in terms of density, just acknowledging what zoning is, it would not be allowed with a minor variance. However, there has been 2 minor variance requests over the last 15 years where it's been granted and has impacted the density. So I think because it's not specifically stated in the code, it has happened in the past and could have happened in this case.
Any other questions for staff? Okay.
Actually, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure that Heather Manzo knew this, so I just want to add, Lee Hutchins, who's your applicant, definitely spoke to me. It was probably 2 to 3 years ago now. It's been going on for a while. My initial reaction to him was no. And he then pointed out the property across the street, and I told him I would honor the decision that had been made in the past, which was made with a minor variance. Again, he wasn't able to get out the signature, so we're not looking at a minor variance. So the decision's not mine, it's yours, and you have findings to make, so clearly it's a different creature. But I did want to let you know that we definitely had that conversation, and I wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay. Could the applicant come forward, please? And state your name, and obviously you know that staff is recommending denial. Would you like to say any words to counter that? Can you hit the button, please? Thanks.
My name's Lee Hutchins. Yeah, I just found that out.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right. Would you, so you really want the four different lots here as opposed to 3? And
yeah, I
that's
mean,
what the,
not to sound like nanner, but when I bought the property, I looked straight across and there's 4 on the same size lot.
mhm.
So that's why I went ahead and bought the property.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks.
I'd like to have the 4.
Okay. Is there any questions for the applicant? Seeing none from the commission, we'll move to public comment.
Oops, sorry.
I'm Barbara Patterson, and we own the 3200 block on Otha Street, which is 3 parcels south, and on the opposite side, we're on the west side of Otha Street. And we've owned that property for 56 years, I guess. About probably 35 or so years ago, or yeah, probably about that, the parcel directly across the street from us went through this process and wanted to put 4 dwellings per acre, and that was denied. When we bought our property years ago, it was called 3 dwellings per acre with a mobile home overlay. So it's a mixed bag. Our street has mobiles as well as stick-built houses. Ours was a stick-built house, and probably about 54 or 55 years ago, we put a mobile home for my husband's parents on the back of our property. And about 12 or 15 years ago, when the freeway was going through and took out part of that mobile home park on Lampa Lane, we purchased, through the auction, we purchased another to put on our property so that we could have 3. But we made an application at that point in time to see if we could have 4 dwellings per acre. And we were turned down on that. And in order to put another dwelling at that point in time, we were required to subdivide our property. So it's no longer 1 acre with 3 dwellings. It's now 3 1/3 acre properties. And if you look on the map's not still up there, but if you look on there, you'll notice most of them are 3 dwellings per acre. There's one across the street from us that Barbara, the Lanes owned, and there are 2 dwellings per acre on their parcel. And we were never notified when Millard put 4 dwellings on that one that's directly across from the one that that Mr. Hutchins is interested in. And we were quite shocked when we saw it happening. And the only thing we could figure out is because, I don't mean to be rude, but Millard sometimes, he's a very well-known builder in the neighborhood, so, or in the city, I should say. So I don't know if he had some way of getting that passed, but we were never notified about that, and we're surprised to see that happen. We feel that others have been turned down to increase the density, and we don't think it would be a good idea to do that.
Okay.
We also
Thank you.
have another
Say your name.
complaint.
Your name.
State
You
your
have to say your
name for
name
the
first.
record, please, sir.
So you have to tell him your name. and-
Les Patterson.
It's so we spell it right, too. That's why we have you write it.
I belong to her. But anyway, another complaint we have, it has nothing to do with this particular street. Where our property is on Otha Street, and one of the mobiles we put in, the one we got from this mobile home park or whatever, no, actually, it's the one my folks lived in. They built, and we didn't know this was even going on or how it happened, but whatever. The property adjacent to our property, right to the west, the same property line, they put in, I don't know how many, 3 or 4 or 5 2-story buildings or whatever that are like fourplexes or something along that line. I don't know exactly what they are. And the same gentleman that made a comment about the water situation, we have never had any kind of a water situation on our property. After they built those, every time we get a heavy rain, we have water built up all over the back of our property. So that's an issue we have, which we don't think was right. But
It's increased density on that. It's on Airport Road, on the west side of our property. So it's caused us a problem with that increased density.
so anyway, that's basically my comment, so.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commissioners. I'll be honest with you, when I first saw this, I looked across the street and said this, and then I looked at the square foot difference, and this reminded me of the previous one, and I thought this one wouldn't be a big deal, but apparently we're in the weeds again on some of these. Could you staff, the one across the street did not get a variance and just did it? Did I hear that right?
So in searching the record, it was approved in 2007, so 15 years ago. And it was not a major variance. It did not go through a public hearing process. It was reviewed by staff and administrative review. And the minor variance had been approved at that time. As I stated before, though,
Were the regulations the same back then?
they were the same, yes. So under the variance header, which is what goes before the planning commission, it specifically states no effect to density based on zoning. And the minor variance section doesn't have that same statement. So I honestly believe in reviewing the record that density didn't come up in the review. So yes, it did get approved in 2007.
Any questions, comments, discussion, commissioners?
I have just a statement I'd like to make.
Sure.
In our packet, it does say that the taxes were not paid in October as of yet when this packet was printed, but online it does say they are paid.
Yes, Mr.
Still
Chairman.
gunning for that IRS job, aren't you?
So it was my understanding when I read this, that the difference in that, in the previous one and this one is that in a minor variance, all of the neighbors that touch the perimeter of the property have to say, okay, I don't have a problem with this, and one of them didn't.
Yeah, for a minor variance to be approved, all affected abutting property owners need to sign off on it. And in this case, they were not able to obtain all signatures.
Okay. Commissioner Eswine, is your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when I first saw this application, I thought, well, why is he asking for a variance? Because there's nothing about this property that substantiates granting a variance. When the property to the east is, and this is where I was wrong, I was thinking that that the property to the east is, we just approved a subdivision in there with parcels that are less than 12,000 square feet, and probably even less than the 10,000 that he could get. And I asked Heather, why doesn't he just rezone it to be compatible? But then she said, well, because that other property is actually zoned MH12. So it's not a, the lots are compatible with what wants to be done here, but the zoning isn't. And this points out the fact that this adjacent property was approved as a subdivision with fewer than or less than 12,000 square foot lots is another reason why we need to look at 1710, because it was approved under the open space subdivision. That being said, I do not believe that he meets the requirements for a variance, and I cannot vote to support this request.
Okay. Commissioner Lloyd?
I don't know if Heather can answer this question, but do we know what direction the one property owner that is abutting this property did not approve for the minor?
So there are two abutting property owners that would be affected, and I don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
So it wouldn't have been the new development that Commissioner Eswine is referencing?
No, there's a parcel in between.
Oh, okay.
And it would not have been to the west either. I just wanted to make sure that someone who had received this wasn't the one saying it wasn't okay.
Okay, any other commissioner discussion, comments? I'll just state I'm okay with agreeing with staff on this one.
I think it's the first time I've seen staff deny a variance since I've been here. So I'm going to go with their recommendation on that.
Okay.
Can I speak again?
Sure. Oh, one more.
Regarding the homeowner that didn't sign a paper, I sent 2 certified, tried calling him, tried other ways to find him, could not find him. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay.
So can I ask a question?
If you know, we could do a continuance and give you one more month to get that signature or something, but that's,
No, I tried for a couple months, I think it was. That's
Yeah,
why I had to
I-
go through this variance process.
yeah,
Okay.
okay, thanks. Any other discussion or perhaps a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I move to deny variance VAR 2022-0394 based on an inability to make all of the required variance findings.
and a second.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Kilgore. All in
Perry.
favor? Huh? Oh, that was Perry. Oh, sorry. I heard something from that end.
Commissioner Espine, can you make any of the findings? There's 3 findings.
I can make finding number 3, but I cannot make findings 1 or 2.
Is that the same for Commissioner Perry?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Nay by, I heard it over here. Commissioner Lloyd? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Motion.
who seconded?
Perry, Commissioner Perry
Thank you.
seconded, yes. Did you want to explain?
Yeah, I'll give my reasoning.
Okay.
I can make the findings, and I feel like precedent, even though it's a minor, I think that it's like a loophole that we don't have zoning density addressed in a minor variance, but we do in a major variance.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item 6E. Discussion and possible action regarding a request from Green Thumb Industries for a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding an ordinance amending location requirements for medical marijuana dispensaries and marijuana retail stores. Heather Ferris.
Thank you. Heather Ferris again for the record. So as we've discussed several times at recent meetings, the Board of Supervisors adopted an ordinance in 2014 establishing regulations for medical marijuana establishments. The ordinance included the requirement for an SUP and limitation not only on the zoning districts within which these establishments can be placed, but also the specific section, township, and ranges in the city where they may be located. These locational requirements were added to the ordinance at the Board of Supervisors' first reading to address the concerns that were raised by members of the public regarding the ability to locate in areas that are more residential in nature. Following the approval of the recreational marijuana by the state in 2016, the board adopted regulations in 2017. The regulations for recreational marijuana establishments essentially mirror those for the medical marijuana establishments. Medical marijuana dispensaries and marijuana retail stores are allowed, subject to a special use permit, in the general commercial and general industrial zoning districts within specific section, township, and ranges. These locations for the general commercial are essentially along Carson Street between the Douglas County line and Moses Street in the southern part of the city, and along Highway 50 East between the Lyon County line and just west of Solomon Road in the east part of the city. And then for the general industrial zoning districts, the allowable areas are really focused in the eastern part of the city along Highway 50 East, just east of Draco Way to just east of Empire Ranch Road. There are additional requirements, as you know, in Division 1.20 of the development standards for distances from schools, preschools, daycares, and facilities whose primary service is to provide recreational opportunities for children, and proximity from residential zoning districts. So the request before you this evening is to modify the locational criteria which I just reviewed and can be found in Carson City Municipal Code 18.04135 and 18.04150, to eliminate the section township and range requirements. And it would essentially open up all of the general commercial and general industrial zoning district parcels in the city that could meet the requirements of Division 1.20 of the development standards. Those changes are shown here and also included in your packet. Staff is recommending the Planning Commission deny this amendment to the Board of Supervisors. Staff is unable to make finding 2 in the affirmative, in that the applicant has the burden of proof to provide facts supporting the proposed zoning code amendment. And that evidence has not been provided, that the circumstances have changed since 2014. Placing such a use outside of the currently defined areas could result in incompatibility with existing uses. Moreover, I would note that I don't believe there are areas in the general commercial or general industrial zoning districts outside of those current boundaries where the setback criteria outlined in Division 1.20 could be met. So yesterday afternoon, we did receive a revised request from the applicant. Those revisions include adding marijuana dispensaries and marijuana retail stores to the list of conditional uses in the retail commercial zoning district, in addition to the request that I just outlined for you. Since this request was not noticed, the Planning Commission cannot take action on the revised request. However, I think there's merit to you having a discussion about the portion of the revised request which was noticed, that original portion of his request. And we can vet any concerns that the commission has, and you can provide staff with direction when we come back next month with the changes that he's just requested. So with that, I'm available for questions, and the applicant, Will Adler, is also here. He may have a brief presentation.
Okay. One question for you first, Heather. So for clarity, this request is really removing the section township part. The second one that we're going to see next month that you said we might want to talk about a little, that piece is where it moves into different zoning, right?
So I think what you want to talk about is stay focused on the original request, which is
Okay.
the section township and range. Once we notice for the retail commercial portion of his request, which we just received yesterday, then we can have the full discussion. I think right now, not taking action on it is important, but just having the discussion on that original portion of the request about the change to the section township and range locational criteria.
So would we want to deny this now, knowing it's coming back next month, or just continue this and make one request for next month?
So it's noticed so you can recommend denial, but
Okay.
I would recommend bringing it all forward
Okay.
together. But we can have the discussion again about the section, township, and range locational criteria and the proposed modifications to that. We can't have the discussion about the retail commercial stuff.
Got it. Okay, one other quick question. Will any of this change whether they have to come in for a special use permit for whatever location might be selected, or?
As proposed, no, and staff would not recommend that.
Got it. Okay. Commissioner Preston?
Heather, Heather, I understand that our November meeting is going to be pretty packed already because we're already scheduled to be here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes.
And that our last meeting went till 11:30 at night. So my question for this is, has this already been scheduled for this, or are we going to be here till 3 o'clock in the morning?
It has not already been scheduled. If the applicant's willing to push it to December, we can consider that. We may need to have an early start in December.
So real quick for staff, this is going to be pushed back clearly until a further date, and in which case there will be public notice for this.
Yes, we'll have to provide public notice for the revised portion of the application.
So 3 o'clock sounds about right.
But we can act on what is here tonight, right? We don't have to wait and try and bundle this thing up.
You could act on it. I would recommend just having a discussion on it and bundling it so it's one cohesive ordinance going forward to the board, or one cohesive recommendation for denial, whichever way the planning commission goes.
So I have a question for staff. So if we were to deny this request that's in front of us tonight, could he then even do what he wants to do with the second piece?
Yes, he could come forward with a request to modify the retail commercial zoning district standards, which currently prohibit medical marijuana or retail marijuana establishments.
Commissioner Borders?
I'm just trying to figure out which tail's wagging the dog. If we denied this tonight, and then next month it comes back with this thing back in it with some more stuff in it, or I guess I would think that if we denied this tonight, then that gives staff a position just to look at anything that comes forward and says they've already denied this, but we can consider that. I'm just not sure.
My recommendation would be for you to provide staff with some general direction as to what you would like to do with the proposal that's before you tonight. We can't discuss the retail commercial portion of it, but his revised recommendation includes both the retail commercial portion as well as this section township and range locational criteria.
Yeah, but if we accepted your recommendation and denied this proposal, is that not guidance?
That's guidance.
Mr. Chair, I think part of what's in the substance of Heather's report is the fact, okay, let me back up. The board came up with locational criteria back in 2015 when they created the ordinance. That locational criteria was developed at the Board of Supervisors meeting. What's before you right now, and you just got a preview of the movie, it's coming back, it's even going to be broader, is a request to change that locational criteria. As I understand it, the application before you doesn't really provide justification on why we should make a change. What did the board get wrong? What's changed since 2015 to cause us to reconsider that locational criteria? And I think it was the absence of that information that caused the staff to recommend denial. That said, I think there's a benefit to this commission vetting this request, thinking of the request in general of, okay, the board adopted locational criteria in 2015. You're now being asked to change that locational criteria. Is there a good reason to do that? And if the answer is you look at the application, you don't see a good reason to do that, I think there's a benefit to the applicant and you saying, applicant, this is really interesting, but what did the board get wrong in 2015? What changed? Maybe you don't see it that way, but I think that's what the staff is seeing. And it would be good for you to have the opportunity to have that conversation so the applicant can hear what it's going to take for you all to entertain changing that locational criteria.
Okay, thank you. I think I want to hear what the applicant has to say now.
Will Adler, representing Silver State Government Relations, representing GTI Rise here today. Filing this application for zoning change due to the current changing in cannabis licensing policy in Carson City. So as we presented previously in front of you guys during the last bout of cannabis changes, Rise had serious concerns with the density and the zoning issues related to cannabis in Carson City, especially the dispensaries, when it came to doubling the number, because this exact zoning barrier and this exact issue existed prior. To develop, the process or how we got here, this was submitted the day after the day of the last Board of Supervisors meeting, because the timeline was such that we had to submit at that time, and Speaking to the real estate team and speaking to those involved, I said, what is the biggest barrier? What needs to be changed in the zoning code? What are your restrictions? They pointed to the township zoning map and sort of that restriction as the one they needed changed. Since then, and since we started going out and doing a property search in Carson City, it's become clear that residential commercial also would have to be included in the scope of this, because there are no properties in Carson City available today under the current zoning barriers that exist when it comes to cannabis. If we're gonna put 3 on the south end of town, there's one maybe that would fit in there possibly. But other than that, there's nothing in the whole of the zoning today where you could actually zone a cannabis dispensary in Carson City as it sits. So that's the genesis, or why Rise brought this petition or this application to Carson City, was that restriction there. The findings from staff, I agree with, except for number 2, obviously, but I agree with it from not a Carson City level, but actually a state level in the law that changed in the state of Nevada. So what happened wasn't a Carson City change from 2014 to now. And back in 2014, the tone was restrict these and keep them away from residential and keep them outside of the dense commercial corridors of the center of town. So that's where we end up with these townships sort of in the south and the east end of town. But the state law that changed that I was referring to was actually due to unrestricted gaming licenses. You can no longer zone within 1,500 feet of them. So to put that in perspective, Rise's current dispensary today in South Carson is not zonable. It's within 1,500 feet of the Fandango, right? Everything else on the south end of town is also bubbled out due to Bodine's, right? On the east end of town, inside the other township bubble, is Slot World, right? That now has created a bubble around itself that cut the amount of space in half that we could have used previously within the township bubble. So there was a change. It wasn't maybe a change in Carson City code, but it was a change on what zonable space is actually still allowable in Carson. Was cut in half basically by the state change with the 1,500-foot gaming license change. So that restriction wasn't in place when the 2014 barrier was thought about, was talked about, because that barrier came in 2019, state law came in. It's not in Carson's ordinance because it doesn't need to be. The state law, is on top of the local ordinance, and it does preempt us or restricts us from accessing anything within 1,500 feet of a gaming property. Because of that, the current zoning bubbles are too restrictive and don't have the same relevancy that they did back in the day, because they are far more restrictive than council actually thought they would be at the time, because that law didn't exist in 2014, right? I'm not criticizing staff or their findings there. It is just a separate thing from Carson City's own ordinance or their own town. It is the state law that changed that actually caused these greater barriers. Like what I was saying though is Slot World, if there wasn't that barrier there, there's 2 properties that we could maybe have selected, but that's a statewide barrier that cuts us off, period, end of story, right? So those factors encompassed together make the situation at hand that we have in Carson City, and it relates to the total application and why I changed it in the ways I changed it. But to talk to the township itself maybe today and keep it to that topic, the township barriers are in place from 2014. They were well thought at the time, but they are no longer the same barriers that they were in 2014 because of that new state law. Because of that, the property search is not going well, and there is almost nowhere to zone it in the current township bubbles that Carson City allows it in. Hence the need to expand it outside the township bubbles. And at this point, we think retail commercial as retail cannabis stores, the name implies, would be an appropriate zoning place as well. But, that's for the next hearing. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff or the applicant? I mean, okay, if I want to open my business and I'm highly restricted and can't find a business, why can't staff make that finding that he has a good justification for removing the barrier? Or was that not in the application
That was
very
not
well?
in the
Yeah,
application.
it was a rushed application. I apologize.
So it's a bad application. Okay.
Can I raise my hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Real one or
Um,
electronic?
For our attorney. Does the state restriction on retail cannabis facilities next to a casino apply to those casinos that do have a special use permit but are not constructed yet?
I'd have to look at the statute. I have no idea.
What I'm thinking of is we have a special use permit for a casino in the shopping center, the Kmart Shopping Center.
If you guys can vamp for 5 minutes, I can look it up.
What we can
No,
also
it's
do
just
is,
something,
we gave that a time frame because remember they wanted a time frame that was reliant on the court action, and we said, no, we would not do that.
yep.
So we need to, for next meeting, we can look up what that time frame is, as well as give the DA's office a chance to research it.
Well,
'Cause I
it-
think you need to look at the two
It's
in
gonna all
tandem.
roll into the same thing that they're
Exactly.
gonna bring back to us, but I think, in looking at this little map, that, that's gonna take a big chunk out of the middle of this. If it would seem to me.
Understood, and I think it would be great if the applicant brought graphics that describe his bubbles.
Mhm. Okay. Thank
But,
you. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I don't know if I'm allowed to comment. There was one previous one where, a casino was moving in, but it wasn't open yet down in Henderson, I believe. And they did open a dispensary prior to that, but, that's a different township and I'm not sure what, Carson City agreed to in that special use permit with that casino. So I can.
Commissioner Preston.
One of the questions that I had when I first saw this come up is I thought, okay, what specific is the difference between 1804.135 and .130? And that was one of my questions. And it's very difficult because our map, I mean, I appreciate this right here. However, what I would request of staff is if they could change the colors a little bit. If we look at something on here to give to us in advance to look at something, because between peach, pink, and kind of the other thing, I have a difficult time seeing and differentiating colors. And I do know that some of these have one zoning, some of them have the other. The other thing is that I forget things, and I know that we've been working on Title 18, and I don't know if we actually sat down and looked at the 1.35 and the 1.30 to see if we had redundancies or if we were actually causing not only for marijuana, which, but for other uses to not be allowed in an area and only restricted to the east and the south because it's not allowed in the north. So that's what my concern is I'm looking at this going, okay, that doesn't make any sense that it was divided that way. And I'd like to have some more information, but like I said, is the November meeting, I don't know, you guys, I don't know if you would even be interested in doing a separate meeting to try to delve into this a little bit and kind of clean it up.
Okay, Commissioner Lloyd?
Based on what Heather was kind of asking us to do, I would also like to provide direction to the applicant to provide more justification for amendment. And just be very clear about that.
Commissioner Perry?
So, Will, you're proposing that the restrictions that were put into place as far as where marijuana dispensaries were going to be allowed in these general commercial and industrial zoning, which I'm sure there was a whole lot of work in 2014 and a whole lot of time and a whole lot of citizens that commented on that. Are you saying that your two clients that you represent want to move and they feel like they're being restricted and they can't find a place to move within within all of these sections and areas and commercial zoning and all that are there now? Is that what is driving this?
Well, thank you for the point of clarity. I should explain it a little bit greater. As I stated during the discussions on doubling number of dispensary licenses, Rise GTI actually has a second license in town here. So Rise is going to keep that current location they have in the south end of town, but of the 4 licenses, they had 2 of them because of an acquisition of somebody who got that 4th license, right? And to be clear today, I'm representing GTI Rise only in this matter because they're the only one who has a stake when it comes to additional licensing and additional stores. But they wish to also use their second license now that the town, Board of Supervisors has chosen to double the number of allowable dispensaries there. They now have another license that they have to use by, or at least show significant progress of use by February 2023. And that's why we're here today, is that second license of theirs. Sierra Well isn't, applicable at this table or discussing this at this time because Rise has a license out there in addition to the one they have today. Thank you.
So I guess what you're saying is, and they intend on using that, and it's restricted now.
Yeah.
According to what they want to put this someplace else where it's not allowed in the zoning. And that's what's driving this.
The drive of this is to try and place that license somewhere in Carson City, truly. I mean, at this point, literally there might be one spot in the south end of town, maybe if the landlord will lease us, but at this time he will not, by the way. But today there isn't in the allowable zoning a place to put this dispensary that actually would be openable within any time frame. I mean, there's not a lot of properties in GC that fit the bill for a dispensary anyhow. But in general, I would say, it's not from a thought that this isn't a great town to open a new dispensary, and it's just the idea of clustering 3 at any one end of town, with the south end having 2 today and one in Sierra Well being on the east end of town. There's one in Mound House right on the other side of the east end of town, right? A third one there, economically is not feasible for them to open a viable business, they believe. But secondarily, they just literally can't find properties in the current restrictions that would meet the appropriate zoning distances, state and county ordinance wise to date. And that was their concern publicly with not wanting to expand the number because their own concern with operations of that license. Yeah.
So hearing you say that with regards to the intent, wouldn't it be more effective that you came and said, oh, they want to put it over here. Let's consider adding this. Because what you're proposing here is opening it up to all commercial and industrial in the whole city. And I just see that as being, how many people can we fit in this room? Isn't it better to do this surgically than to just cast this gigantic net and say, remove all of the restrictions on township range and section? I'm thinking of our workload here too, because I know what went into this originally. It was a lot of work before it was done. And I really don't want to spend the time reopening that to the, I just think, are you going about this the right way?
Well, I did produce a map that we should maybe discuss at the next meeting, as it is more in the line of retail. But the properties available, we were able to find 3 that could work in retail commercial zoning, but they all ended up in the north end of town. I didn't like the policy of township bubbles to date. And that was the one restriction that we did think was, overly limiting for just cannabis, was saying it's in these townships. So I was hesitant to put new township bubbles just in the north end of town and ask for that. But that could be a way to achieve our ultimate goals, because that's where we've been able to find properties to date. If that is preferred, that is something I could re-amend the application to do. Because that's what we're talking about, honestly, is trying to find somewhere in the north end of town, because economically that would be desirable to spread them out. I okay.
Okay, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I think,
And
yeah, I think it's the due process. He's starting at the beginning just so he can cast a wider net to find a place.
Yeah,
But it makes it
really problematic.
yeah.
And if I don't want to say this too loudly or publicly, well loudly for the record again, but
You're on there.
There's a reporter right behind you.
Yeah, indeed, right? What has happened in the past with real estate searches for very limited property uses, cannabis especially, right? When identified that this is one of two properties, all of a sudden it is harder to lease any of those two properties when you publicly identify which ones those are. But we have identified a few. I understand your meaning that maybe we should do a regional change or regional expansion rather than a carte blanche. But when you do identify a specific spot, the lease does go up, weirdly enough, for these properties in these discussions with these landlords. So I'm hesitant to identify a specific one location. Let's just change it for that. But there's a few in mind I could state, but they're within that bubble on my retail map there. But it is one where they do want to operate that license. They do want to do business in this town, and they want to bring a successful business to this town. And at this moment in time, they feel incapable of doing that with the current zoning restrictions. To date, we do need to expand it to retail commercial. It feels like it is for a further discussion, but I do think the merit of why we put it in these township ranges or should we leave them there is one of discussion. And are the township ranges the same relevant pieces of property that they were back in 2014? I do not think they are still, because the statewide changes and the restrictions that are there. The current zoning changes, the zoning rules in Carson City, the residential adjacency, everything there is manageable and very comparable for us to encompass in the property search. But the map and where it is and those zoning restrictions are limiting the parts of town we can look at to the point where we're not able to find anything. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Or we can move to public comment if there's any public comment. Seeing no public comment, I guess I'll start off the discussion. I actually don't mind removal of this. My question was about keeping the special use permit. There's plenty of barriers to this at the special use permit level. We'll know where it's going. We'll know everyone's concerns in the area for that. So I actually, this issue isn't, I don't mind it as it sits now. But anyone else, their feelings or motions, or I don't think it matters, I guess, at the.
Where are we going?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'd like to just say something.
The state, maybe that's where we go with this, is we should state our feelings on this thing so it gives guidance when they come back.
Okay,
To
then I'll
meet
state
our
my
concerns.
feelings.
Yeah.
I think we should follow city staff's recommendations and deny it. And if the applicant has something else that he wants to do that's more surgical or specific, he can come back with that. Because I think when you cast this wide of a net and say, oh, we're going to remove all the restrictions off of it, there's going to be places that we didn't even think about. Because this city is big and there's a lot of commercial zoning in this city. And there was a lot of thought, I believe, into here's where we're going to limit it because it minimizes closeness to residential and so forth. And I think it's just opening a can of worms that we're not going to know the impact of until an applicant comes in and says, okay, I want to put in the fourth one here and it's right over here. And then we're dealing with that. So
Thank you.
I think we should deny it.
I'm personally, I think that he makes a really good case on the restriction issue, as far as it being even lucrative for any type of business, and of course the fact that if he does pinpoint any type of location, that there is absolutely going to be some price hikes in those realties, as we have seen in the past with some of these other businesses that have asked for zoning in certain locations, certainly not in our county that I'm aware of, but other that I am very aware of. On the other hand, I am not excited to see public comment on this. I welcome it, but I am not excited for that. And I think it'll be interesting and fun, but not very exciting. So in which case, I say bring on the public comment, because that's who I'm here to serve, is the public. So
Okay, Commissioner Borders, hands raised.
I kind of have a question for staff to go along with this. If we denied this today, when would it go to the Board of Supervisors? Before our next meeting?
No, it would likely go the first meeting in December, which I don't have that date off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to wrestle with where we go and what kind of message are we trying to come up with. Is if it, in October, we recommend not accepting this, and then in in October, we recommend not accepting this, and then in November, we come back with something entirely different. Then both of those things go to the Board of Supervisors either together or one after the other. I just think we create a lot of confusion all the way up and down the line. And I just don't feel that there's a good way to address that.
I would suggest bringing it back perhaps to the next meeting in November and making a decision at that time, or alternatively December. I don't know how the applicant feels about December.
Okay. Well, if you want my feelings now, I'm inclined to agree with staff.
It is my intent, or it'd be my preference, to continue this to November and bring back as a united piece with the retail component, together. I don't want to separate this more than we have to, and I don't know if that is appropriate for me to ask at this time, but yeah, I with the amended, language, if that isn't acceptable to talk about the retail component this day, I would prefer to continue it and come back with a more complete application in November, if that's appropriate, but I, don't want to.
Here, just stay there.
Will either for the
Stay.
record. Yeah.
Commissioner
Okay.
Preston?
I will. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is, right now, honestly, we have already been told that our November meeting is going to be arduous at best. It's going to be a long one. Would you consider putting this into the December and actually getting it a little bit more clear and bringing in, because your goal is the retail.
Yeah.
And my feeling on this, on a side note, is I'm wondering, you're bringing it up for marijuana, but I'm wondering if this is why, part of the reason that North Carson Street has had a hard time doing the development because of the restrictions of not being into general commercial. Even though a lot of the uses are the same in the parallel when you when you start reading through it. And so I'm wondering if you could, flesh it out and do it in December rather than in November.
I am hesitant to take the December meeting strictly because the state has mandated we have to show significant progress or try and, obtain real estate before February 2023. They're pretty insistent upon, do or die deadline there. I could bring it back in December, but maybe it's a question for staff. Do we end up at the February meeting for Board of Supervisors, and then past that, it gets more complicated. I know we're already probably in January if we aren't at the November meeting today, but I don't know.
So staff, if we either recommend denial or approval, that still kicks us to December, right?
So if you recommend on this particular application, the applicant still has his request that his modified request that we'd be bringing back. I'd prefer to package those together to take them to the board. That all being said, if we push everything to December, yes, Will, I think you're looking at a February date for final decision by the board.
We'll start at noon.
Heather?
Well,
We'll get lunch and dinner.
My question is, if we continue this, do we save ourselves anything? And if we do, then I would be in favor of doing that. I don't, this is gonna be contentious enough without two pieces being there and we're playing dueling banjos trying to figure out which one we're talking about.
yeah,
So if the applicant is willing to continue this,
definitely.
I would support that.
And I would suggest continue to date uncertain because we have to notice anyways. And then we'll go over the November agenda items at the end of this meeting.
You know, maybe we can coerce somebody else into moving to December.
If I end up in December, I'll end up in December, and that's understood, and I appreciate the opportunity. But this was a bit of a rushed application to get in with the timing of the Board of Supervisors, and I do think there's a lot of merit here, maybe more than I put in the initial application. So I'd be glad to rewrite and amend it. And I do feel like the issue is one that deserves, scrutiny and is one that is restricting this company at this time. So it is one that, I thank you for taking the time on. And, I understand the need to continue it as it is a little bit of a mess right now. So appreciate it.
Okay. Commissioner Eswine, I imagine you're saying this is a Board of Supervisors issue, and why is it before the Planning Commission?
No, actually, I was going to make a motion to continue this item.
All right.
In that case, I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Borders. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays?
Can I
Motion passes.
clarify? Is it continued for
To date
date
uncertain.
uncertain? Thank you.
All right. Moving on, staff reports.
Okay, actually, two of our big items that we thought would be coming in November are not coming. Okay, so I'll just tell you, I'll start with that. So what you will not see is the 306 unit apartment complex, and you will not see the brewery, okay? What you will see, which I think is gonna be manageable, is there's a pretty big nursing home project, special use permit at 1802 North Carson. So there's your North Carson development for Commissioner Preston. A SUP for model homes over at Lampa, so that won't take too long. A special use permit for a tattoo shop, and I believe that's existing building, they'll just occupy space. SUP on East Robinson for a beauty salon, and again, that's just occupying a space, it's not new construction. And a special use permit for apartments over on Gordon. So we went with a 3 o'clock start because we had the 306 unit apartments in the brewery on. But given what we've ended up with, I think the nursing home is a big project. It's a bit isolated, so I don't know how much community input we'll get. The others are pretty straightforward.
Okay. Let's see, any commissioner reports, comments? Commissioner Eswine?
Yeah, I had a brief discussion with Heather about this the other day, but I would like to see some review, revision, or repeal of 1710 put on the agenda for discussion and action. But I also like to say that you could do it after the first of the year and then wouldn't make any difference to me.
I think the contrary is true. If you want it on the agenda, you're gonna have to be.
Your microphone.
Your microphone is on.
I just won't be up here.
Did you want to add your retail commercial discussion or staff being able to bring some clarification for that?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to have staff's clarification on the actual tangible differences between the general commercial and the retail commercial. Because it seems that when, and also give me a map I can see.
Commissioner Perry?
Yes, after the last meeting, it struck me because we were instructing or trying to direct people to the growth management plan, right? To go take a look at the growth. And then I went home and I tried to look at it. And guess what? It doesn't exist really unless you go into the minutes of the meeting. So I asked Hope to set up a sub-web page under the Planning Commission called the Growth Management Plan or the Growth Management Commission, and populate it with the approved growth management plan by the city council, so that when we say, go look at this, including, you know, what was approved by the council or the supervisors and all of the departments that are in there, so that it's transparent to everybody, you know, of when we say, go look at this, and then they go to try to look at it, and it's not there. So, and I saw the first part of that Christie did the other day, which I thought was a good start, but I think it still needs a description of what is the growth management plan and who is the growth management committee and when they meet. And here's the 2022 approved by the council, because what's in there now is the agenda from that meeting of our meeting that has a whole bunch of other agenda items on it. And I think that's just going to confuse people. So
Thanks for pointing that out. I had asked her to put that together and I haven't reviewed that.
it's a good start, but I think it has a little bit to go
Understood.
from there. And I guess my other one is, I don't know how others feel about this, but that section of Title 18 that deals with accessory dwellings, you know, I think I would be amenable to going back and just looking at that. I know Commissioner Eswine has said in the past, there's some opportunity here, but I think as it sits now, it's just not very refined, and there's no way to restrict it somehow. And I know we don't deal with water and sewer, but I do think that really does need to come into this, because I think that's an unfair part of it. And I still have these concerns about what happens when mother-in-law dies. How do we know that there's another family member there? And what happens to the house that this guy said, oh, I'm moving, and my grandfather lived in the accessory dwelling for the house I'm moving from. So what happens to that? Not everybody's going to have a mother-in-law to move into a house. And I just think my gut feel tells me these things are getting rented. And policing them by city staff is just not realistic. So.
And I'd like to add on to that is that when people are talking about ADUs on basically a national basis, they're looking at accessory dwelling units that they are looking for, specifically the Airbnbs, being able to rent, being able to do their affordable housing, infilling, that type of thing. So by using that name for basically a guest house, caretaker house, whatever, what that's done is that muddies the waters. And so if we could change that, because when, you know, everybody has it in their mind that it's an accessory dwelling unit, yet in our code it says, no, it has to be occupied by family.
Commissioner.
Since we're on the record here, I'm going to go ahead and state that I'm absolutely anti-regulatory on what people's personal dwellings are, and I'm going to continue that, absolutely.
Commissioner Lloyd.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Commissioner Perry in we should review this, but I look at it as the opportunity for those affordable housing or for other and we need to have that discussion. I think that the Planning Commission had that discussion when it was a different commission, and I think we need to have it again.
I would agree with that, and that is my intent, not to say don't do this. We either need to allow it or not allow it, and in what zoning districts do we allow it, and what do we not allow it, because it is part of zoning, right? Because it's how many dwellings can you have per
Okay, staff
So-
understands you'd like to talk about this at a future meeting.
And
Understood.
real quick as well.
Maybe
this,
a little PowerPoint with summarizing the
Well,
challenges.
I think we need to move on because you're going
Okay.
into a pretty extensive conversation.
Oh, okay, one last statement then. If this does go, if we go to regulate this, I can guarantee that we're going to see a lot of people popping these up real fast before that becomes restricted.
Okay. And with that, we'll move on to public comment. The public's invited at this time to comment on any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda. Is there any public comment? Seeing no public comment, this meeting is adjourned.
I move.